Hello and welcome to the Business of Authority. I'm Jonathan Stark.
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
And today we're going to talk about time.
Time management. Even more fun.
Oh, I thought we were going to talk about Doctor Who.
I hope not.
That's probably the nerdiest thing I've ever said on this show. Yes. So listen up, Soloists. This one's for you, especially for you. We want to talk about time management. And this probably sounds boring, but I promise it will be somewhat interesting, at least somewhat interesting. Set the bar kind of low.
We'll do our best, right?
Yeah. But Rochelle and I had sort of a post-show chat last week after we talked about the dark side of delegation and how we sort of manage our time. Simple as that. Like, what's the framework that we use? And I think I mentioned on the last show, I'm working with someone where the goal is to get them down to, from say a 35-hour week to maybe a 20-hour work week, something like that. So, and it's wild because I've never had an experience where I watched someone else's calendar. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes. Yeah, we don't. All we know is our own. We
Right.
don't watch somebody else's.
Right. So when I would be, I would say like, okay, here's how I do this. And it was, at least to her, was like, huh, that's a weird way, or not a weird, it was just like, I'm like, doesn't everybody do it like this? And she sort of coined this, she was like, wow, like there's sort of a ruthless simplicity to this. And I was like, yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly how I approach it. Sort of create this ruthless simplicity around how you decide what you're going to do next, like what your week's going to look like, what your day is going to look like. And then from your days come your weeks.
I just realized ruthless simplicity. She just captured your whole vision for your business.
Yeah, it's true.
Not just your time management.
Yeah, it really hit me.
Yeah. Well, why not? If you can do it and it suits you, why not?
Yeah. Okay, so I think we could start really anywhere, but the thing that I think about, a lot, and in my experience, people don't think about this that much, or at least not consciously. They probably have a subconscious routine around this, but I read Getting Things Done by David Allen, would have been probably around 2006, and I was like a big fan of that book. It really, his style, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like a bestseller, big time bestseller. And he has this concept of inboxes. Part of the book is this concept of inboxes, and like where are your inboxes? Where can people put stuff on your to-do list? Where do you put stuff on your to-do list? And he has you, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time, but my recollection is that the beginning of the process of getting yourself clear is to catalog all of your different inboxes. And he means this like, the book was very, I remember it, like I literally went out and bought a filing cabinet, like a 4-drawer file cabinet.
I was going to say, when you said that, I'm picturing like a literal inbox.
Yeah, and he talks about literal inboxes a lot. Like, maybe, I don't know, does this even happen anymore where you have the inbox and outbox on your desk in a corporate environment?
I remember having that, and I remember frowning at anybody other than my assistant who came in and put something in it.
Right. But the metaphor might be weak because I don't know if people really have these anymore. Seems like a lot of people probably, it's all digital, but the concept is great. It's like an inbox is kind of like someone else's to-do list for you. It's like their honey-do list. And you probably have a half dozen of them at least. And it includes everything from your actual mailbox on your house or your apartment, and your email inbox, your social media, probably social media if you're the type that is really engaging with people there, your calendar, if you have Calendly or some kind of scheduling thing, your to-do list. So anyway, I've thought a lot about it subconsciously. I've organized it in a way, and it's been so wild to kind of teach it to somebody because it makes it all conscious. And anyway, so that's where this is all coming from. So I'm probably going to have a lot more to say about it than you want to hear, but
well, we'll try to control the geek outness
Yes.
of this episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is it's ruthlessly simple.
So how do you think about time management in a big picture way? When you think about, and I'm not even going to say your calendar yet, but just your time, how do you think about how you're going to use it?
My knee-jerk reaction to that is I don't think about it. Like, I have goals for it where okay, here's how I think about it. So I have this goal of getting my hours down to a minimum, not to zero. I've gone too far. Like 4 hours is about as low as I can go, where before I just completely disengage and just forget that I have a business. You know what I mean? It's like, it's
laziness
weird.
takes over.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Like my there's a bunch of processes in my brain that automatically work, like thinking up a daily email. And when I'm not spending enough time like interacting with somebody about business stuff, that shuts off. And then it becomes really hard to write, so there's like 4 or 5 hours, like a minimum for me. So like think of it as like a day a week. That's kind of like, but I like to spread it out. I wouldn't want to do it all in one day. I'm not a batcher. So anyway, so I think about it like that. I want my hours down because that's my cost, and I want to maximize my profitability. So I want my costs as low as possible. So I get those down. So that's I guess the goal. And then if there's like it's tough to call this a thought because it's more of observing my reaction. But when I do stuff, when something appears on my calendar or in one of my inboxes, I have a finely tuned sort of like radar detector for how it makes me feel when I see it. Like, am I excited to do that or am I bummed? And I notice that. And when I'm excited about it, I'm like, okay, I want to do more of that. It's energizing. Okay, those are the things that I like. And sometimes it's like, it might be the same kind of appointment, but it's with someone who's more energizing that I prefer to talk to, or it could be a type of activity, I don't know, like cash flow projection spreadsheet, like maybe not my favorite thing to do. So I can tell, I just sort of know, because I am sensitive to it, which things energize me and which things drain me. So for the hours that I'm going to work in a week, so whatever that minimum is, then I want it to be chock full of the energizing stuff. And like we said in the delegation episode, anything that drains me either gets cut or automated or at least systematized. Does that answer the question though?
Yeah, no, actually it does, because, before we hit record, we were talking about like how far away we are from each other on this spectrum of managing our time. And I think that's helpful. So the way that I've started doing it in the last couple of years is I kind of think of my time in 3 chunks. There's genius time, genius zone time, where I'm doing things that only I can do and that I just really love to do. Mm-hmm. And then I have build time, which is, building the business time. So that could be talking to a potential client. It could be working on this podcast. It could be, writing a post, whatever those are. And there could be some crossover between build time and genius time, depending on what the actual activity is. Mm-hmm. And then there's free time. Mm-hmm. And for me, I always have trouble shutting it off in free time. So that's always my challenge. My biggest challenge is that free time. And I think, it's easy to say, oh yeah, sure, it's easy for you, Rochelle, to have genius time because, you've been doing this for a while. But I think what happens is that whoever you read, whatever gurus you read who talk about time, a lot of them are serving an entrepreneurial audience of people that have employees.
Yes, exactly.
And so genius time, and they'll use different words for it, but genius time is all about being alone. No clients, no employees. It's just you dreaming big about the business. Well, I disagree with that for our kinds of businesses. Like, I count my time with coaching clients as genius time because I'm using literally the best of me in those calls. And when I hang up, I might have more energy than when I started. I might have less, but I'm still feeling good about it.
Yep.
So that's genius time. And I'm with people. I'm not by myself. So I don't feel like I need, and unless I'm developing something like, when I've been working on the Soloists Women podcast, or I'll work on, a new program, then I need big chunks of time without anybody else. But it's really about being true to yourself and recognizing how you can get to the point where we've talked about this lately, this upward spiral, right? Where your life just keeps getting better and better. And for me, that's about getting as much of my time as I possibly can into that genius zone. And then it doesn't, it doesn't feel like work most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like that's the outcome. I suppose it was implied, but that's the outcome when I get rid of all of the draining stuff, and like the energizing stuff is just like, why wouldn't I do it? I get paid for this. Are you crazy?
Yeah. And, just from a very just logistical viewpoint. So what I finally did was I realized that my Calendly, which is how most people get onto my calendar, wasn't optimized for those three things. So I went back in, and I like to work in like half day segments. And so that's how I think of my calendar, is like there's the morning and there's the afternoon. And so I went back into Calendly, and based on each type of meeting, I slotted it in a particular half day of the week, and more than one, of course. So, so I have certain time blocks for client calls, and I have certain time blocks for podcast interviews, and certain time blocks for kind of everybody else that just falls into the build portion of the business. Like I'm going to meet somebody new. We're going to have a get to know you half hour would be an example of a build activity. Or I'm writing a piece. It could be the podcast. It depends. I don't feel like the podcast is in my genius zone yet, but maybe it will be. I'm working on that.
We're not so far apart.
No, I think we're on the same side of the spectrum, but just kind of different ends.
Cool. Okay, so let's loop back to this inbox concept a little bit, and the thing about a thing that I don't recall ever hearing from anyone, because I'm a big fan of that Getting Things Done book. That had a big effect on how I run my day, and it's been a long time since I read this, so it might be straight out of the book. I don't know, but my recollection is that the book is there's a lot of orientation around paper inboxes, and I barely, I mean, literally my only paper inbox is like bills that come in the mail, which is a very low, most things are paid automatically. Yeah, it's just not that much paper inbox. Occasionally there'll be paperwork from like a school thing or the vet for the dogs, but it's very low. And even then I usually take a picture of it and it goes into a digital system. So the order, one of the things that I've found this kind of surprised me is that I have a very particular order of checking my inboxes. So like I have inboxes, they're sort of prioritized, and I kind of do throughout the day, I kind of do this round robin thing where the first thing I check is my calendar, like what, either the Friday before the next week or Sunday night, like what does the week look like? And then in the morning, so I know if I need to set an alarm or something like that, get up in the morning and it's like, okay, what are my appointments today? And so my calendar is exclusively, I think with rare exceptions, my calendar is exclusively for appointments. So it's something, it's a block of time that I can't just move with impunity. I would have to like communicate with somebody and say like, oh, sorry, can we move this or whatever. So I don't put to-dos in my calendar. I don't put like block of time for a specific thing, like edit the podcast or something like that. So
or write your daily email. That would not be in your calendar.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's a task that I can do whenever. It doesn't need to be done at a particular time. It might have a deadline, like the daily to-do is, it needs to happen every day, but I can do it at any time. So that would go in my to-do list and my appointments. So the order that I check the inboxes between, if we just limit it to calendar and task list, to-do list, first I check the calendar and I'm like, all right, do I have something to do? The answer is either yes or no. And if it's yes, then I'm probably gonna, and I haven't got enough time to do anything before the meeting, then I'm just going to prep for the meeting. Let's say I've got like 10, 15 minutes. I'm just going to like, whatever, it depends on the person. Like if it's a podcast interview, I'm going to like remind myself what the email chain leading up to it was, or if it's a coaching call, it's like review their to-dos from the last time and all that stuff. But if I look at my calendar and I've got some block of time, oh wait, before I move on from that, importantly, I think it's importantly, when I'm looking at my calendar inbox, I cannot see my to-dos. So like if you used like Google for all of this, you can have like your tasks overlaid on your calendar. I don't do that. And I think it's a mistake to do that because that is all information that's just like buzzing around in your head, stuff you got to do. Look at all the stuff I have to do, but you don't actually have to do it right now. And there's nothing you can do about it right now because you're preparing for this appointment. So for me, having them visible at the same time is a no-no for me. Because I don't want to, it's just such a distraction. Yeah, it's a huge distraction. It's just clutter. There's nothing you can do about it. Pretend they don't exist. You're just going to worry or just think about the wrong thing. It's like focus on the thing that's coming up. Then when the meeting is over, the interview or whatever it is, then I go back and I check the calendar again. Every time I hang up the phone, the very next thing I do is check my calendar. And I see how much time I have until the next thing. And if I have, and then if there is a significant amount of time, I don't know, an hour or something like more than that, it's usually more than that, then and only then will I go over to my to-do list and say, okay, I've got time, I've got this much time. What do I feel like doing right now? What is the thing on this list of maybe 10, 20 things that I feel like doing? And then if there's any that have a due date, because they don't all have a due date, but if any of them do, then I'm going to probably try and tick those off first. So that piece about not having your to-dos shoved in your face constantly, it was, I think, a big thing in terms of like the person I'm working with, I think was fairly important in terms of getting that swarm of bees feeling out of your head, from hovering around you, that constant feeling of like, I'm never going to be done. Right? Because most of the to-dos in my list are recurring. They come back daily, weekly, monthly. So you don't want to just like look at this, you're just shoveling sand against the tide. It's like you don't need to see that. You should only see that at particular times when you can do something about it. So I don't know. I'm probably over making the point, but I think that's pretty important.
I get it. It's like a treadmill, and he's just like, okay. Is it ever going to stop? And
Groundhog Day.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think especially for people that put their personal things on there as well. And if you have kids and if you have like more than one, you've got everybody's schedules and you have maybe a spouse or partner schedule in there too. And it can be overwhelming for some people, or it can give you this sense of being needed and being busy, but then it takes your focus off the things that you really want to do that just don't have an immediacy to them. Because then you don't get that sort of psychological lift by crossing something off the list.
Yeah, which I'm a big fan of I will, if I do something that wasn't on my list, I'll put it on my list and cross it off.
Cross it off, yeah. Now, is your list, is it manual? Is it like a piece of paper?
No, it's digital.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I use Remember the Milk, but that's irrelevant. It's just the one I picked a million years ago because it's very cross-platform and it's very fast. I'm sure there's a million options out there. It doesn't matter what one you use, but it's purely digital. So that way I can, if I've done paper in the past and I just don't always have it on me, and that's a problem because I do have I have a complete mix. There's no separation between my work and my life stuff. So I'm checking off to-dos like all day long every day. So I can't, it's not something I only do at my desk. Yeah. So it has to be on my phone.
Yeah. Interesting. I've gone back and forth on that. And right now I keep a paper list. And when I had my property business, I had 2 lists. And because when something was big, like the initial renovation or I'm interviewing a bunch of tenants because it's turning over, then there was like a flurry of activity. But normally it was just, nothing. It was just, these are the things you do 2 or 3 times a year and boom, you're done. But there's something I've started doing in the last maybe 6 months, and I'm trying to remember where I read it. I think it's think it's a Coach University thing, Dan Sullivan, where when I go to bed, when I'm getting ready to go to bed, I write down the 3 things that I accomplished for the day that I'm really proud of. And I write 3 things that I want to accomplish tomorrow. Not 1, not 10, 3. And the research behind that says that your subconscious mind will work on that while you're sleeping. But they're not like little things. They're big things, at least for me. That's how I look at it. It's not like, oh, I need to send so-and-so a note about X. It's, I want to launch the podcast. Like that's a big thing, but it's still only one of 3. And so then when I get up in the morning and I'm, once I'm kind of, I've checked my calendar and kind of go through the same sort of rituals that you do, is I have this sheet of paper and I will write down those 3 goals. But there's also all the little to-dos, because those are not to-dos, those 3 things. Those are my goals for the day. Those are the big picture things to keep my eye on. So I have those and I just write them again at the top of the paper. And there's something for me about writing it that feels like it goes from my hand to my brain. And I don't want to write much more than that, because I'd rather just type it and have it on all of my devices. But I've been experimenting, and I've liked where that goes, because those little things that I will forget, I have to write them down or put them in an app, because otherwise they're bees. They're buzzing around my head and I can't let them go. So those get written down. Mm-hmm. But for the rest of it, it's really important to keep focused on the big things that you want to keep moving forward.
Yes, for sure. So there is one time I write stuff down, and that is, I find that there's certain creative tasks. It's almost always where I've got either a full day or a half day completely devoted to something that needs like 4 hours. So, for example, I just switched one of my workshops, automatic proposals. I switched it from a cohort-based launch cycle to an evergreen, you can buy it whenever you want type of thing. And since it had been built with a whole bunch of assumptions about the launch and the cohort and all that, I knew that there were going to be at least 20 little changes that needed to be made all over the place, in my email marketing software, on my website, in Moonclerk, maybe in Stripe. I knew I had to check a million things, go through the whole process, and it was going to take, and I had to do it all in one go.
Oh, no interruptions.
No interruptions. So even though most of the tasks that I would have to do were on the computer, I didn't want for some reason, a strong pull for me to write down the to-dos on a piece of paper. There's no order to them. There was no organization to them. I wasn't going to have to word process it, So it's just I was away from the computer, and I was like, okay, let me just think of all the places I need to check. And I just brain dumped onto this piece of paper. And I knew if I tried to do it on my computer, I'd end up doing something else. So I kind of captured all of this stuff on a piece of paper. I filled up a whole sheet of paper with stuff to check. And then I went in and I just laser focused on okay, check Moonclerk, go through the form. What's the name of is there a name of a coupon that doesn't make sense now? And there's just a million things to check. And so that is, it's funny because I usually go to my actual office to do stuff like this. So I know I won't get distracted by the dogs or kids or anything. And it's funny because whenever I'm there, I almost always have a piece of paper with that list of stuff. So there is some connection there for that kind of work and that kind of a to-do list. But it's a very ephemeral kind of to-do list. It's it's never going to recur. It's never going to come back again. So it's fine that it's not typed in or anything like that.
Well, yeah. And what you're saying is the process that you would normally use would have distracted you. You're right, because you're going back and forth. And there's something about having something on the screen in front of you that makes it harder to concentrate and think about the 27 things that might be impacted by this thing that you're doing. Right?
Yeah, because probably what would happen is I would think of it and then I would try and then I would go fix it. And then I would be like, wait, what was I doing? Right? So yeah, something about that is super important. Another thing that we started talking about here a little bit, you said, the 3 things aren't to-dos. I want to talk about the to-do list, the tasks on the to-do list a little bit more, at least the way that I do it. One is that I keep them to the smallest next action. So, let's say launch podcast is a goal. I wouldn't put, you tell me, what's a really, really small task that you could do to move that ball forward?
It could be like put episode 3 to bed. I've listened to the audio edit and approve or change.
That's it, right. That put it to bed is almost too big for me.
But I stack them, so that's how I do it. Like I'd listen to the episode and then I would like make sure it's posted in the right place. Like I would that one thing initiates a series of things, and so if I just wrote put it to bed, I would know what that means. But yeah. You could parse it out in multiple pieces.
So that's a good point, right? Because I'll have like today, every Tuesday, I have a recurring to-do to edit TVOA. And that's it. It just says edit TVOA. But that triggers me to go over and open another checklist. It's essentially, it could be in my to-do list, but it would just overwhelm the system. But you're right. It's essentially a small project, but I've got an SOP for that. So, and when I see the edit TVOA, I know that I've got this checklist. So then I just go over there and I go down the list. So it's kind of like a sub to-dos. I don't put the subcategory to-dos. I guess I could, but it would just overwhelm the app. It would look wrong. It wouldn't. I'll keep an open mind.
Yeah, you just made yet another case why we all need SOPs, because what happens, like because the new podcast is new and I'm still working out like what happens when, my SOP is like this draft document. But once I've got the system down, like we do with TBOA, I'll have that SOP. So if I wanted to hand it off to someone, I could, or if I needed to refresh myself because, I don't know, I was off in the mountains for a month, breathing fresh air. You can do that. But the point is that it triggers automatic things. And, we know that there's, 5 steps, for example, to get the podcast from once it's recorded to getting it scheduled every place it needs to be. So, yeah, I think, at least for me, knowing what those things are, I don't write them down on my handwritten sheet because they're in an SOP if I need them.
Yeah, exactly. So when I'm working with someone, one of the things in private coaching is every 2 weeks we have a phone call, and at the end of the phone call, I update this sort of list of to-dos that align with their strategy and their objective. And in those, like a lot of the things that I will put in there are things that they've never done before. So they're surely not going to have an SOP for it. So in those cases, like let's say the overall task, or it's too small to call it a project, but it's bigger than a task, which would be like publish a sales page for your new program. That would kill someone if I just publish a sales page for your new program. Paralyzed. So what's the first thing you can do? Read my Building the Perfect Sales Page article. That's a to-do. Copy the outline, the 9-point outline, into a Google Doc. That's a to-do. Brain dump into each of the sections anything that comes to mind, but don't let yourself get hung up on it. And if you don't have anything to dump in there, just leave it with the 9 headings. To-do. That's a to-do. They're all super manageable, small, just the next thing types of things, which really is me slowly dripping out the SOP for building a sales page. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I want them to, I always want, and this is for students and for myself, I want that dopamine hit of crossing the thing off the list. So what I don't want, the worst is when somebody opens up, they look at their calendar, they know that they've got time, they open up their to-do list, and they reorder it, and they prioritize it, and they rename things, and they're moving things around, and they're like, which one of these things should I do? And it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and nothing gets done. And then I wonder what's going on Facebook, and I should probably check my email. And it's just like, no, I want them to be able to jump in and have maybe even a 3 to 5 to certainly under 15-minute task. I want to have tasks on there that are small. Anyway, but like we just described. We described the opposite of that, which is like the to-do trigger that sends you over to an SOP. But if you find yourself reorganizing your to-do list more than ticking things off of it, then you know that probably you've got some mini projects on your list that you don't have a checklist for. So try and break them into, 5, 10 subtasks. Like, what is the next action that you need to do? And just have that one thing on there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really, it's that psychological lift of knowing that you're making progress, and then you can check something off. It's that little bit of confidence, especially if it's something you're worried about, you're not sure you can do, imposter syndrome, whatever is lurking there, is just, one step at a time. I'm going to do this first and cross that off.
Exactly.
Do this second, we'll cross that
how
off.
to eat an elephant.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I mean, it sounds so easy, so simple. And it is simple. It just isn't always easy, which is why I think we have to kind of train ourselves to do that so that we can be productive, but still enjoy what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So the next inbox on my list, so it's my number 1 inbox is calendar. Number 2 inbox is my to-do list. And depending on how my day is looking, I could have there's probably two next candidates for what I'm going to check next. One is I'm going to probably triage my email inbox, or I'm going to check my maybe someday list. So those are probably the 2 candidates of what I'm going to do next. So the email triage, and I think both things are worth talking about. So the email triage is, I think, pretty much straight out of Getting Things Done by David Allen. And it's like, he's got a nice little framework for it. And I might have put my own spin on it over the years, but basically I just go through and I get a fair amount of email every day because of the mailing list. So maybe I've got 75 messages every day, and using keyboard commands in Gmail, you can just sort of down arrow your way through the inbox, like down arrow X, down arrow X, down arrow X, and you could select all of the emails that you can tell at a glance are either marketing emails or spam or whatever. They're good to have, or maybe stuff like I'm on a lot of people's lists and I save their messages as like a swipe file. Mm-hmm. So like, oh, Amy Porterfield's doing a launch. I wonder what her copywriting looks like for that, So like, I'll subscribe to that and then like put all that stuff in a folder. So in some cases, I even automate that piece, but I'll just triage the inbox. It takes under a minute to go through 70 emails with the keyboard and archive like 80% of it. And then the rest of the stuff I need to open. It's kind of like, how they say people sort their mail over the trash can. It's just like that, where I'm looking through my inbox. I'm like, not junk mail, but like stuff that I don't need to read right now. It's good to have. Maybe I'll search for it someday. Probably not. But it doesn't need to be opened right now. And then I'll go through the stuff that needs to be opened, like people responding to the first message in my mailing list where I ask them, what success would look like for their business or whatever. I've posted some question. Then I'll go through those and I'll say like, this is total David Allen, can I answer this in under a minute? And if the answer is yes, I'll answer it and archive it. And if the answer is no, I'll create a to-do to go back to it when I have time to give it the answer it deserves, and then I archive it. So what ends up happening is as you go through your inbox, you get to inbox 0 like every day. It's like, because if you allow, here's the thing, I don't allow to-dos like to sneak into my inbox, my other inboxes. If I have to do something, I put it on my to-do list and I keep my inbox empty, because any crazy person on planet Earth can put stuff in my inbox. I don't want any crazy person on Earth to be able to give me to-dos. So for me, it's very important to keep that separation between the two systems, because if I've got time in my calendar that I want to do something, I don't want to look in my inbox. I think a theme that's cropping up here is distractions. Like it's like these are all strategies to avoid distractions.
And as I was listening to you, I was like, oh, so that's what he does. Oh, so we do some of the same things and we do some differently. So I actually use software to do some of this. I use SaneBox. And so I have things like I've coded particular people or sites as sales, for example. And those are usually like product stuff. So those go to a sales folder. So I don't even look at them. They go right there. And I might not even look at them every day. I might look at them once a week. It kind of depends how busy I am with other stuff. I have one it's a sane later file. And just as an example, from LinkedIn, I get a notice when someone is either participating in a conversation that I've started or has asked for a connection or has accepted my connection. That all goes to the later file. And I never look at that till the end of the day. Never. And, there's certain people that are like personal that have my professional email, and I will have those go there as well. And then I've got a few others. I have like a travel one where everything related to my travel goes, so I don't have to think about it. So if I am traveling, everything's there. If I need an itinerary, it's there. So I do a lot of that. I pretty much, though, never take something from my email and put it on my to-do list. So what I'll do is if I see something that needs to be done, but I'm not going to do it now, and I'd say I do about the same thing, like, can I do this in a minute? Because I'd rather be done with it.
Yep.
I will. Yep. But I will show it as unread. Or I will mark it, I will flag it. It depends what it is. Usually the flag stuff are things I want for later. They're not things I have to do. As long as there's still an open to do, I just show it as an unread message, because then when I look at my email, I'll see that little number and it will tell me that I have to do something. Very, very rarely does it go to my to-do list.
Yeah, that turns into B's for me. I want my inbox empty. So I've tried that. And there's another thing in Gmail, there's a snooze function that I have tried, but it just doesn't work for me. It does work, but I don't love it. There's something about it that the snooze is like, comes into your inbox and you're like, basically snooze this until Monday or whatever. And then it disappears and then it just magically comes back on the date that you said. Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I don't like that one either.
I'm not like saying you shouldn't do that, but I just don't. Yeah, because here's what happens. I'll have a memory of the message and then I'll think I dropped the ball on something because I can't remember replying. Like I can't remember what state it's in. So I don't love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think same. There's just something, but for me, the dots in my email are not a buzz because there's not usually that many. I mean, I'm getting rid of everything. There's going to be, there might be 2 or 3 things at any given moment, and a lot of times there's none. But when there are, I sort of like that reminder because I don't have to think about it. It's not a B. It doesn't become a B for me until I have to think about it and I might forget it. So that's why, the to-do list is great for stuff like that because I don't want it in my calendar if it's just like a silly little thing, or if it's like a home thing I have to do. I have to remember to, schedule the air conditioning cleaning, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's just, and again, it just goes to point out what matters is how you experience this stuff. And, you won't know until you try. Like if you try to get rid of that stuff and then see how it feels and decide not in a day, because if you're the kind of person that thrives on a busy calendar, looking at an empty one is going to make you crazy. So you try it and you sit with it before you decide you don't like it. I just think this is a very iterative process of figuring out what works for you.
Oh, yeah. Because, earlier I was talking about that sort of metal detector, or what I say, radar detector on like, energize versus drain. Like notice that stuff, because it's not like I'm just like pulling back the curtain so you can see how one wacko does it, not necessarily suggesting that it's the way to do it. I wouldn't, this is always going to be a very personal thing, but perhaps just there's certain experiences that I think are symptomatic of whatever your system is, that it's not working. So like the feeling of being really busy but never getting ahead, that swarm of bees feeling, those are signs that like your time management's not, there's opportunity for improvement. So, okay. So I said, I've got calendar, I've got to do, I've got, depending on how much time I have, I might triage my email. And then there is usually reserved for days that I have nothing to do at all, or I've got a solid half day and an easy afternoon, or, easy morning and then a solid afternoon. Then I'll check my maybe someday list, which again is a David Allen thing. And the trick with this is there's this thing that happens where, especially entrepreneurs, especially solopreneurs that don't have to get anybody else's approval, you're going to have great ideas occur to you in the middle of the night or in the shower or whatever. And you want to capture it. And the tendency when I was younger, I would do it. Like, oh, what a great idea for a new workshop. I'm going to put that on my to-do list, even though it's just out of nowhere. It has a lot of energy to it. I feel very energized, but it's probably not aligned with those three things that I want to get done that day, or my theme for the year, or whatever I should be focusing on this particular week. And if I want to have this kind of ruthless simplicity to my schedule, I don't want to forget the idea, but I don't want to put it on my to-do list either, because I need to think about how it fits into the overall strategy, or if it fits in with an overall strategy. So I put it on this maybe someday list. And that's, if I've got a nice chunk of time, I'll go in there, because that's where all of my innovation comes from. So I'll say, like, all right, I've got time to think. I've got tons of time to think. I haven't, this summer for me has been very like around the house type projects, redoing the bathroom. I haven't been creating enough new stuff. I feel like I've been kind of lazy about creating new stuff. So I was like, okay, as we're coming into September, I'm going to be spending more time looking at the maybe someday list and pulling out the things that really do fit and create new stuff, create new value. That place, I think it's important, at least for me, to have a place to capture what seems like a good idea in the moment, but not to put it on my to-do list yet, to put it in a place where I can think about it with like a clearer head in the cold light of day, as they say, and say, like, was this actually a good idea, or was I just up too late? you know?
And then you can figure out what you need to do to push it forward, or make a go, no-go decision, like a listening tour, or, a slew of emails, or, write a sales page and test it out.
Exactly.
The question that came to my mind, and I'm wondering if maybe listeners are thinking this too, is what do you do with your launches? Because you do a million launches. Like, you do some little tiny launches and you do some big launches. Like, where are those? Are those on your to-do list, or are those in your calendar? Where do you, or is it all in the SOP?
That's a great question. And I've tried different things over the years. The calendar thing, I tried charting out like an entire year of launches, because pretty much every month I launch a workshop, and it just didn't work for me. I kept on getting caught short, it didn't matter what I did. If I blocked out an entire, all day task the week before, promote 5-day podcast challenge or something like that, I would be blind to it or something. It just didn't work. So for me, that all, to me, I put that in code. I just wrote it so it happens automatically. The calendar thing didn't work for me. If I was going to I didn't try this because I went from calendar to code. I don't think there was a step in between. But if I was going to do it without code, I would create a recurring task in my to-do list, because that's where I put tasks, and that is what it is. And then, then I would have an SOP. So it would be like on the Monday before the second Monday, because it's not always, it's Monday. There's actually some complicated date math with the launches. But whatever the recurrence is, I would put in my to-do list now. If I was going to do it without automation, I'd put it in my to-do list. It would recur on a particular date, and then it would show up every day at the right time, and it would stay there until I ticked it off. For me, the problem with putting stuff like that in my calendar is the next day it disappears. If it was a Monday and now it's Tuesday, well, I got to remember to look back at Monday for all this stuff that I didn't do, or I have to move it, always be moving it. So I don't like that interface for this kind of stuff. Like, it's like, if on this particular Monday I need to start promoting 5-day podcast challenge, I don't have to do it that day. I could start on Tuesday, I could start on Wednesday, but the farther I get into the week, the less effective it's going to be. But the pressure builds up and it stays there automatically until I tick it off. So that pressure, the urgency of it just is automatic. It automatically builds up. So to me, that kind of stuff I would put in my to-do list. And then yes, exactly. I would have an SOP for the different phases. There's like a pre-launch phase, there's a early registration phase, there's a registration phase, there's a launch phase. It's a real pain. So yes, there would be a to-do for each phase that is sort of T minus the number of days before the go date, and that would recur, and then there'd be an SOP for each one because there's so many moving parts.
Yes.
But over time,
got to have an SOP for that.
Yeah, and I just coded it. But yeah, that's how I would do it if I wasn't a developer.
Okay. Yeah, I just brought that up because I felt like that was kind of the missing piece between the maybe someday and the everything else, because it feels like you're always doing a launch, even if it's just a little tiny like 2-week challenge. It's still a launch. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and if you keep it simple, like if you follow the 80-20 rule, it doesn't have to be nuts. It doesn't have to be really, you really have to ask yourself. I feel like with a launch, there's no end to how much time you could put into it. It's one of those things where the fish grows to the size of the bowl. So you just have to decide at a certain point, am I going to flog my list to get the last possible dollar out of there? Or am I just going to, that's not fun and it's a lot of work and it's not great, I think, for the list. So for me, it's like, well, I'm just going to make people aware of it without going crazy, and whatever sales are. Would they have been higher if I flogged the list, or if I worked 40 hours this week instead of 4 or whatever? Then yeah, it probably would. So there's a real discipline there to kind of play to me, I feel like I'm playing the longer game. It's like, well, if they don't buy this time, they'll buy next time. I don't need to. I don't need to do that like brinksmanship of the deadline. Sometimes I do it, but it just creates so much extra work, and it's like, is the juice worth the squeeze for all of that extra work and more details and moving parts for one more sale? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't have data on it. I don't track that stuff. I have a general idea of like what I expect a launch to do numbers wise. So if it's high or low, if it's really low, I might be like, okay, I wonder if I should do some investigation into that. If it's really high, I might want to, like, what did I do differently this time? Is there any correlation? But I really never think about it anymore.
Well, yeah, there's a difference between like your first launch and your 10th launch. And a lot of the, so-called launch experts like a Jeff Walker, it's really, it's about just over the top constant stuff. And I mean, I just think, you find the right balance for you. But I was just curious because you do have a regularity and consistency to your launches that is fairly unusual.
I mean, it's basically every second Monday of every month. I mean, I just changed this because automatic proposal is evergreen now, but it was that the second Monday of every month, a new workshop started, and most of them are 5 days. One of them's 10 days, and the pricing seminar is like super long. And so the week before the second Monday, which I feel like isn't always the first Monday, but I guess that's impossible. But there's something weird about the date math. I can't remember what it was.
Maybe it's when there's a holiday or something.
Yeah, I think because there's a lot of Monday holidays. I think that's part of it. But it's the kind of thing that you could put in a mildly sophisticated to-do list, and it would just trigger different SOP for the different phases. So there'd be, I think I already listed it. It's like pre-registration, early bird, registration period, registration closed, and then like the post-mortem stuff where I would set up everything for the next one. So if like 5-day podcast challenge launch ends, the course begins, the day that the course begins, I would set up anything that I needed to set up for the next time right then, so that when it happened, it would be done. Because that's when I'm thinking about it. I'm not thinking about it when it's coming. So pulling any of the to-dos that I would have done right before the beginning of the launch sequence, I just do them at the end of the last launch, so then they're all set to go and I can forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's fresh and all the learnings are right there when you're just freshly on the other side of the launch. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, all the tweaks. Anything else? We could maybe move into my most controversial time management or task management philosophy is to just delete stuff that's getting old.
Yeah.
So if I have a to-do on my list that's like a month old, I have demonstrated by my behavior that I am not going to do it. So I'll either delete it, or if I think it's just a really bright idea that I want to keep, I'll move it to a different list. I'll move it to like a maybe someday list. And usually I delete them, but every once in a while it's like I have some bright idea and I'm like, oh, this would be so great. It would totally fit my strategy, but it's just aging here on my list. Obviously, I either haven't got the time or energy or something's going on that it's just not happening, but I don't want to lose it. So I'll move it to maybe someday.
Yeah, the analogy I think is, somebody who does like crafts, like woodworking or sewing or knitting, and you just keep piling up all these supplies, but you never actually make anything. It's kind of the same
your stash
thing.
is growing.
Yeah, at some point, you got to get the stash gone, or at least out of sight, or you have to start, right? Which is the goal of the maybe someday list. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I bet as predicted, I've been soapboxing like crazy, but this stuff is all I've just really dig this stuff. I think it's some of the big picture things I think are really important to got to get those swarm of bees away from your head. That's the main thing.
Yeah, well, this has been a very kind of tactical episode, and I think we've had a couple of tactical ones. I think we'll tackle something strategic next time, but I think this is helpful when you're in that mode where you're saying something's not working. I'm not feeling productive. I'm not feeling like I'm moving towards where I want to be. I think this is a good primer to kind of sit down and rethink your processes and see if there's anything in here that you can't adopt for your own.
Yep. Steal it. Take what you like. Whatever
Absolutely.
works.
That's what this is for.
All right, cool. Well, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark.
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
And we hope you join us again next time for The Business of Authority. Bye.
Bye-bye.